Can any of you hear me? You can, okay. The AHI team, for some reason, none of the three of us don't have any audio, so we can see all of you talking, but we can't hear any of you. And I've tried switching my audio 3 times, it's not working. So we're gonna log back out and log back in real quick. Don't do that. Oh, okay.
There.
All right, we're ready with Mr. Hankey's.
Okay, now I can hear you. Great. Thank you.
Okay, now you can hear us. Okay.
Thank you.
We don't want you to hear us talking until we're ready. So I call the meeting to order. The first order of business is to get the, accept the minutes from the May 25th meeting. Can I have a resolution? Resolution by Matt. Okay, by Mr. Hankey. Second by Matt.
I gotta do it, I want.
Any omissions or corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Carried. You got to vote on something today, Bob. Isn't that amazing?
Yes, Mr. Ball, right? Or wait a minute. Mr. Haas is here though, right? So we have Mr. O'Brien.
Lester's not here.
Okay. Mr. Haas, Mr. Hicks, and the vice chairman. That's your forum.
Right, yeah.
Right.
Who is, 2180?
Tom Rogers.
Tom Rogers? Okay, good. Okay, first order of business is talking about smoke-free campus. We have with us Adirondack Health Institute to give a presentation about smoke-free campuses. So if we can, Katie, who's ever going to take the lead on that, go ahead and you can start your presentation.
Yeah, thank you for having us. My name is Katie Cook. I am the manager of the Clear the Air in the Southern Adirondacks program at Adirondack Health Institute. For a little bit of a background, Adirondack Health Institute is based out of Glens Falls, and we are involved in a number of population health improvement programs, Clear the Air being one of those. I'm going to defer to my team today for the presentation. With us, we have Mary Ridinger, who is our reality check specialist and works with the youth in Warren, Washington, and Saratoga counties, and Joey Boswell, who is our community engagement specialist. So I'll turn it over to the two of them.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Mary Ridinger, and as Katie mentioned, I'm the reality check specialist, and I'm excited to talk to you today about going tobacco-free. So in the past, I know we've had many conversations about this for Washington County, and I'm excited about the opportunity to once again bring this to the forefront. I'm here today, as Katie mentioned, with my co-presenter, Joey Boswell. So there are many wonderful reasons to go tobacco-free or smoke-free in this instance. So there's a lot of financial benefits. There's an environmental impact reduction, community health improvements, and there's public support and demand in our area for our county to go tobacco-free. So the big picture, the total impact of smoking every year is $332.5 billion. That breaks down into, $150.4 billion in lost productivity of smokers. So that's people, obviously, who smoke, their lack of productivity. But to further look at this, 5.6 billion is lost due to secondhand smoke exposure. So not only are we having a lack of productivity for the smokers, but also those that are surrounding them, maybe getting exposed, walking into buildings, walking through designated smoking areas, that kind of stuff. And there is a major impact financially from environmental cleanup issues. So $11.5 billion is spent annually by employers to clean up all of the improperly disposed or tobacco litter that we see on properties. So to break that down a little bit more, let's say you're a small business and you only have 5 smokers. You're incurring an additional cost of $30,000 extra that you would not be having if you had 0 smokers employed by your business, right? So if you're a large business, that can be as much or more than 100 smokers. The additional cost that is associated with that is more than $600,000. So that gets quite pricey per smoker. So I guess to break that down a little bit more, employees who smoke cost employers around $6,000 extra. So as we noted with the numbers, for 5, it was $30,000. So that's how we got to that math. But here are just some of the things that we see that really add up. So we've got the major one is smoke breaks. You guys can probably, you probably know that smokers take breaks more often and they take longer breaks, traditionally speaking. So the smoke breaks really do add up over time. There are additional healthcare costs. So typically it's more expensive from an insurance standpoint to employ a smoker. So, the premium and other associated costs are higher, which then falls down onto the actual employer. This can be navigated in a different way. So there are plans that offer low cost tracks for those employees who don't smoke and actually incentivize their employees to quit smoking. So I think that's a really great idea. There is also additional sick days. So on average, smokers miss 6.2 days of work per year in sick days. And that is 2 to 3 days longer than a non-smoker. This is because when you're a smoker, your lungs are actually a little bit fragile, I would say. And so you're more apt to get sick with things like COVID, common colds, the flu, that kind of stuff. And additionally, there's distraction at work, not just obviously for the smoker, but again, for those around them. There's a lot of lost productivity. So beyond the financials, there is a major environmental enhancement aspect to this because each year discarded cigarettes cause $6.95 billion in property damage due to fire. I've heard that anecdotally there have been several fires around the grounds and the mulch and that kind of stuff due to improperly discarded cigarette butts. And they are a top cause of structure fires in the United States. 30% of all deaths that we see in fires are caused by smoking. And even those properly disposed cigarettes may pose a cost. Sometimes you'll have people that take their trash and they jam it in the receptacle, and suddenly the receptacle's on fire when a butt gets disposed, even though they're doing it the proper method. So that costs as well to replace those receptacles. So there's several different ways that this can be a fire hazard. They're also the most common littered item in the world. So 75% of cigarettes are improperly disposed of. Even though most smokers said that they agree that this is a type of litter or hazard, they still frequently flick those butts. And smoke-free policies can help to enhance the curb appeal. So we're not seeing cigarettes all over the entrances and exits of your building. And that's obviously appealing to us, but it is also appealing to the environment. So littered cigarette butts can leach harmful chemicals into our environment. These are things like arsenic, chromium, acetic acid, and a lot more. So this, for example, Lake George in Hewlett's Landing, that park that we have, that can be really harmful to the wildlife. And beyond that, it's harmful to animals or small kids, that might pick that item up and ingest it. This may kill the wildlife if they do this for an extended period of time. And obviously, none of us want our kids to eat cigarette butts, right? So I'm actually from Washington County. I'm from Greenwich, born and raised here, and I absolutely love it. But I went to Hewlett's last weekend, and while I was there was a timber rattlesnake in the water, which is kind of scary. But they evacuated everybody from the beach. And so they were actually smoking next to the grills and other areas. And everybody was clustered in that one little area right there, waiting to be permitted back out into the beach. And this one family was actually taking their cigarettes and putting them in the charcoal grills, which I thought was astounding. Like, I'm going to eat from that. What are you doing putting your cigarette butts in there? So I had a conversation with one of the grounds people, and she said it's a very common problem. It's hard to delineate between the beach and the rest of the grounds. So even though there is no smoking on the beach, she picked up 5 cigarette butts while I was there. And that to me spoke volumes. And again, it was a common source within the grills and stuff that people use that as a disposal method. So beyond that, beyond having, cigarette butts, people it can harm the environment and be ingested. It isn't safe due to secondhand smoke. So even if we're outside, I have to be more than 25 feet away from you to not be exposed to this secondhand smoke, which is obviously very harmful.
And we know that there's no safe level of exposure when it comes to secondhand smoke. The U.S. Surgeon General actually stated this. And we know that even short-term exposure to secondhand smoke can cause asthma attacks, respiratory infections, ear infections, and a lot more. And we also know that around 54,000 people die annually from secondhand smoke-caused illnesses. And this can include, respiratory failure, SIDS or sudden infant death syndrome, and heart disease. And we know that in New York State, that 28,000 people die a year from a smoking-caused illness. So what we did last year during COVID, because we had all of this free time, is we wanted to reach out. We wanted to look at Warren, Washington, Saratoga counties and collect some data. So we partnered with Siena Research Institute. And when we look at Washington County, we actually see that 64% of those surveyed are in support of a policy that bans smoking on all municipal grounds. And then to take it a step further, we then wanted to see how people felt about parks, beaches, and playgrounds. And we had around the same percentage, around 63% of Washington County residents were in support of a policy to ban smoking at these locations too. So you'll see that you have the support of the community, about 64% between the two for municipalities, as well as those parks, beaches, and playgrounds. So when we look at Washington County, we wanted to show you, what are some other areas that have put in tobacco-free policies? And so when looking at Fort Anne actually has a policy right now that prohibits smoking in, on, and around buildings owned, occupied, or controlled by the town. We've seen some really good success in that. We've also seen some really good success in the Greenwich policy as well, which looks at smoking and all tobacco use is prohibited on all tobacco owned ground or on town owned ground. And we also, they have as part of their policy that the disposal of cigarette butts on town grounds is prohibited as well. So you'll see that there's different options on how you can integrate some messaging in there. So that was a really great example. So looking at the bottom line of all of this, kind of wrapping it up, is we know that employers who implement smoke-free workplaces are saving money as well as saving lives. And we know that the savings for per employee on average is around $5,816 that an employer is saving if someone is, if they are a non-smoker. We also know that employers can be pro-health and they can want to include policies and have policies there. But a part of our program as well is to add on the addition of the support, right? We don't want to tell somebody that you have to quit cold turkey or that you can't do this. What we also want to tell individuals is that if someone is smoking, that there is also support there where we can help out with nicotine replacement therapy, where they can have that option as well to get them through the day. And again, just simply showing that we're not suggesting employees or community members that they have to quit. All we're simply saying is that we don't want these products on these grounds, but that there's also support there that we can help out with as well. So what can we do to assist our community, right? First thing is that we provide signage for you. So anyone that goes tobacco-free or smoke-free, we provide free signage for you. We will also have any hardware for that, such as posts or stakes. We can also do employee education and support. This can be done at talking to tenants or talking to employees of an employer in talking about the policy that's going into place, and then how we can also support those employers who do smoke. So that way they don't see it as, okay, we're taking this away from me, that there is some support there as well. We can also refer you to our public health law center that we work with. So that way, as you're constructing policies, they can give you some better guidance. We can also help you with enforcement assistance and guidance on that as well. We have a lot of tools in our toolkit, especially with our partners across the state who have looked at enforcement, and it's worked really well. That's an assistance that we can provide as well. And then also Cessation Procurement. We work with the New York State Quit Line. So we have some health systems folks who can help employees who are smoking that are looking to quit or looking to have nicotine replacement therapy. We can send those employees off to that health systems person, Shannon, and she can help assist them along the way.
And just to tack on to that, in the past, she has been able to provide employers with samples. So if you guys did elect to go forward with this, potentially she would be able to provide at no cost samples just to see how this looks for your structure on a short-term basis.
And then we wanted to finish you out with some examples of our signs, because that can also be a big thing too. What we decided with our signage is we wanted something that was positive. We wanted something that wasn't just a typical no smoking sign that you generically see. We wanted it to be fun and friendly and positive, and also letting community members know that when they see this sign throughout the 3 counties, that it is a tobacco or smoke-free area. So where they're creating a brand relationship with us as well. So you'll see that we have our housing, which is all the way on the left. Then we have in the middle our parks, beaches, and playgrounds. And then on the far right-hand side, you'll see for our employers that do go tobacco-free.
And as Joey mentioned, this isn't just limited to tobacco-free language. We also have signage that says smoke-free, to be all-inclusive of any smoking that may be occurring within your grounds.
So here's our contact information. Feel free to reach out to Mary or myself. You can also check us out at ahihealth.org/CASA, C-A-S-A. That is our personal website, so you can find out some more information if you have any other questions, or feel free to reach out to us directly. We kind of pride ourselves as a walking encyclopedia of tobacco knowledge. So please, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us.
Well, thank you for the presentation. Do any board members have any questions for the Institute? Well, thank you very much for your information. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for this time.
Thanks for attending. Okay, Melissa and Roger, have you been able to start looking into how we implement something like this?
I have taken a look at several different things, some of which was generously supplied by AHI, as a matter of fact. There appears to be 2 government models that are used. One is doing it by resolution. I think you have a copy, or you were sent a copy of the Warren County resolution, which simply says we're going to be tobacco-free or smoke-free. Obviously, we'd have to change our wording a little bit. Although the law says that any place that is tobacco-free is therefore free of anything else, cannabis, vaping, or whatever, I think we'd like to be a little bit more specific in our policy. The second model is used by some of the Midwestern and Western counties, I guess, of New York State. And they chose to go with a local law model that it contains enforcement policies. The Warren County policy does not say anything about what happens to violators. It simply states what the policy is. The local law policies contain actual fines. You're written an appearance ticket, and the Board of Health is the arbiter of both the findings of violation and then imposition of penalties, which is a little bit more formal and obviously requires the personnel to go through and actually perform those duties.
Matt?
Roger, right now, am I allowed to bring a weapon come to the county building with a weapon?
If you're not an employee, yes.
I'm allowed?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you're duly licensed.
All right, I'm just wondering, is there an enforcement issue on that? If somebody comes in, somebody breaks another rule, do we have an enforcement policy as part of a policy on everything that's sort of prohibited, or is some do and some don't?
No, let's say you came in and had let's say you were smoking out front, the deputy would go out and say, please don't smoke out front, and ask you to be removed.
Okay.
You wouldn't be fined, however, if you just got up and left, versus if there was an enforcement policy, the deputy at the door could go out and write you a ticket, and then you'd be showing up just in front of the Board of Health, subject to a $25 fine, or whatever number you set it at, and go through the system that way.
Okay. Mr. Haff? You're muted.
Roger, I read the Warren County thing and I thought it had some contradictory information because it said the campus is smoke-free, but then it also said you had to deposit your cigarette butts in a designated area. How do you do that if you're smoke-free? So I thought it was kind of wishy-washy message there.
Well, I'm not saying I adopt that word for word. It was provided more as an exemplar of the two different methods of, and I did not provide an example of, and actually I think it's Ontario County, which we're familiar with some of our folks having left there, but they for several years have had a fine model. So it was provided more in terms of the two different models, which are the persuasive model versus the fine and enforcement model. I'm not sure I would adopt that language. I would certainly make it more specific as to what you're supposed to do. But what I could see is somebody is smoking in their car, pulls up to a stop, gets out, and disposes of the button away into the door.
But we as a county have discussed going smoke-free and also providing a gazebo in the back to smoke. So it's kind of contradictory.
Yeah, well, we've also talked about the fact that we may have to impact bargain with our employees about how that policy is implemented. So there may be some contradictory things, especially in the beginning, as we talk about phasing those kind of things in as well.
So Roger, are you saying that we could have a work unit that would be allowed to smoke, but everybody else wouldn't because that unit in their collective bargaining allows it? Are we gonna, I don't
No,
suggest
I
that.
think we'd end up with a smoke-free campus, but how we got there was what we'd be bargaining, the impact of that on the employees.
Okay,
In other words, they may have to go out to the sidewalk to smoke and be off campus, for instance. So what's the impact?
all right, thank you.
Brian?
So, Roger, I take it that we have to allow people to smoke, break the smoke.
So the non-union handbook contains a provision, that's the one I'm familiar with, that you get 2 10-minute breaks, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. Obviously, we don't chain people to their desks. If somebody needs to go to the bathroom or somebody, we expect you to get the work done, but that's and I believe that most of them, I'm going to pump and work with, but I believe most of the union contracts have that same language. So if you want to take your 10-minute break and walk out to the curb, off county property and smoke, you're entitled to do that, just like you're entitled to do it now behind the building, for employees.
Okay, we have designated smoking
Right,
areas,
right. But I'm not saying employees will stop smoking.
So all that would change would be like Fort Hudson down the road, that they just don't smoke on the campus, they walk off the property and smoke.
Correct.
Those are the designated
Yeah.
areas.
You can walk around the parking lot, you can sit in the sun and read a book, you can eat a sandwich, you can smoke. That's your 10-minute break to do what you want.
Right now, but if we're designated non-smoking, they can't do that at that point, right? They have to go off campus.
You would have to go off the campus to do it.
Well, right now, we have no restrictions on other than employees.
Correct.
And that's probably the biggest concern of people, that people are smoking, they may have asthma or something going by them, and
Right. We have no outdoor restrictions. We have, obviously, the indoor restrictions all apply to us, and nobody's allowed. And there was some struggles implementing that as well when it first came through. But the indoor restrictions I'm talking about. Right now, there are no outdoor restrictions other than the entryway perimeters that were established.
And so that would change or would not change?
That would change. Nobody would, right. They would have, anybody would be prohibited from smoking on our grounds, and so a member of the public would have to go off, not be here. And that would apply to all of our, well, depending on how you said it, but it would apply to all of our properties, depending on the parameters you set.
Matt?
So 2 questions, Roger. Might it be prudent to enact a resolution and then see how that goes? Because if the sheriff goes out and says, you gotta leave the premises to put that out, it works, you haven't gotta go through the whole local law and an enforcement issue. But if it becomes a problem, you still have that option. And the second one is it a blanket that we have to do that for all county properties, or can we designate certain, it applies to certain places?
You can designate that it applies to certain county properties, but, you had an employee, let's say you said, no, we'll allow it at the highway barns and we won't allow it here. Well, I'm an employee at the highway barn, I get to smoke, but I don't get to smoke.
I'm just asking.
Yeah, no, you could do that. And what I would suggest to you, and you were part of this conversation, but the AHI folks were, let me turn my camera on here, I really apologize. Is you don't just, I think, one day drop the hammer. I don't want you to start to sneak up on it, but there's plenty of fair warning. There's like, hey, we're going smoke-free next month. We're, talk to the employees, tell them that it's coming. Talk to the public, tell them that it's coming. Don't forget, when you come to your next motor vehicle appointment, your next social services appointment, don't forget, we're gonna be smoke-free. And there's implementation issues once you decide what you want your policy to be, and that, I think, would be worth working with AHI because they've got experience in doing that and helping us navigate the implementation parts of the policy as well. Once you decide what it is, then how we can implement it.
So I think from here, if it is the committee's wish that we charge Melissa and Roger to come back with a plan next month and a resolution, and formulate a schedule, start informing the public, informing the individuals, and work with AHI. I think one of the advantages we have right now is that all inside smoking has been banned for years. So that part of the introduction is not quite as intense as the rest of it. So we'll see. But is that the committee's wishes?
Three of us?
Well, we got four of us here. Mr. Hankey gets to vote on this too.
I would suggest to you that you decide, the committee make a couple of decisions here. One is whether you want to do it by resolution or you want to start with implementation of penalties and things like that. And then the second one is task your staff to come up with a recommended implementation schedule for that. The language for the actual, whichever way you want to do it, and then an implementation schedule. How we're going to progress along it, signage, work with Matt in terms of where the signs would be, how we're going to notify the public, putting up signs in the doorway, things like that, saying here it comes. So there would be and again, I'm going to be talking to AHI. These are things we bounced off in our pre-meeting to see what they could offer us in terms of, how long you think it should take before we do this and things like that. And they have that knowledge. I think they're going to be a very valuable resource to us if we choose to go down this road. And say, so I want to do a policy. Come back and tell me what the policy is going to look like and how we're going to get to where we want to get to.
I think I would like to speak in favor of doing it the local law way, not only because my favorite hobby was writing tickets, but not for that reason. I think when you do the local law, you get several different levels that Roger's talking about. You get a public hearing, there's several steps that I think bring it to the public's attention and give people a chance to comment on it. I think that's a valuable thing. I would rather see us do a local law than just, put a motion out and have it be, lost in the records forever.
Remember that you're setting up the concurrent infrastructure to go with that. That's the thing. Somebody's got to prosecute the tickets. Somebody's got to handle the tickets. Somebody's got to hear the violation. Somebody's got to impose the fine. Somebody's got to collect the fine.
If somebody writes a ticket.
Right.
Melissa?
That was part of the concern in the past when we brought up the non-smoking campus subject was the enforcement. And if we were going to go that direction, how we were going to enforce that. And as well as that, there's the effect of having a non-smoking campus, which, as we've seen next door, employees, very well could be lined up on the sidewalk outside of the building or across the street in front of the cemetery. So those were a couple of the concerns in the past. My only concern, if we have the non-smoking policy applied to areas other than the municipal center and those grounds, the enforcement of that. Like, I think it's important if we're going to make this policy apply to all our barns, DPW barns and parks and everywhere else, it's just that implementation and the enforcement.
Should we make a motion, Mr. Hankey be the enforcer? Doesn't that fall to the vice chair?
As long as the tickets are green, that's all I'm saying.
Matt?
I'm going to respectfully disagree with Mr. Hankey. If we have a resolution, goes to the committee goes to the full board, board meeting, if that's open to the public and they can come speak on it, privilege of the floor, we're not shutting anybody off. I just think it's a better first step.
And I know, after speaking again with folks at AHI who were familiar with Warren County, their impression, and correct me if I'm wrong, folks, seems to be that Warren County was fairly successful in implementing it through a resolution model.
I will entertain a motion one way or another.
Do we need a motion to pass?
No, I need a motion that you want, adopt a policy or a local law. Then we tasked the implementers, Melissa and Roger, to put together, and Matt, to put together all the implementation, signage, everything else.
I'm not in favor of local law, so I'm not gonna make that, I'm not in favor of the resolution, so I'll let somebody else do it.
Someone make a motion to do a resolution?
I can't, the chairman wants a motion of local law.
I said either a motion for resolution or a local
Oh,
law.
either one, I'll make the resolution motion, if Debbie can word it, so I don't sound stupid when I try to repeat it.
Do I have a second on that? Do I have a second on that? Who's on my committee?
I know I'm
Matt?
Dana, you and Bob. Dana.
Dana, are you making a second?
Yes, because I also want to, I'll do both. I also want to have a little discussion, a little bit more.
Okay. So we got a
David,
second by Dana for discussion.
David, sounds to me like you want a vote whether we're going to implement this by resolution or local law. We haven't even seen the resolution or local law yet. How can you prejudge the implementation? I think it'd be better if we say, we want to task Roger to come up with a resolution, then we decide. You're doing it a little bit backwards to me. And I also don't think you should do any local law if you have no intention to enforce a local law. And you know that you're not going to enforce this. Everyone knows that. You might might put a note in someone's file if they're an employee, but you're not going to enforce this unless it becomes a really big headache with a specific employee. And then that's a little discriminatory because you didn't do it to everybody. So I think resolution is better.
We're not talking about just employees here.
Well, that your serial offender will be an employee, not the public that doesn't come every day.
We're not tasking them with coming up with a resolution that we're gonna pass out. We're tasking with developing a resolution and then an implementation strategy. And that's what they asked for, is direction, whether we want resolution or local law.
But then at that point, we approve it, we're not approving it now.
No, we're not approving it now.
Thank
We
you.
can't approve it until we see it, but they want guidance on where we're going. Mr. Hankey?
I think the point here is that our problem with smoking outside with the cigarette butts on the ground and the kind of the mulch fires and however many $1,000 it costs Matt every year to pick up cigarette butts, I don't think it has to do with employees at all. I don't think our biggest problem is with employees whatsoever. I think our biggest problem is with the public. And I don't think the public gives a damn whether we pass a resolution or not.
Well, Dana and I have a resolution, Bow's a lot. You're the deciding vote, Dave.
You need
Need four.
four.
Oh, we need four total.
Seven-man committee, you need four affirmative votes.
Feel like when you go to Senate.
Okay, I gotta call it to a vote.
That would be five.
I'll call it a vote. I'm in favor of having developed a resolution and a strategy to come back. So 1, 2, 3. Mr. Hankey?
I don't care. Do whatever you want.
Okay. So therefore, you develop a resolution to come back before the board, implementation strategy. And it becomes like next mass meeting for approval, then passing on to the full board.
Understood.
Melissa?
So can I ask, just for clarity, is that applicable to just the municipal grounds, or are we doing it to all county-owned
County
property?
property or?
All county-owned property.
Vehicles and in your home.
Is that acceptable to the committee? We want all municipal grounds? Municipal properties?
Almost, that was a good place to start.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, thank you, for the folks at AHI for
Thank you.
taking the time today. From my behalf, they've been very helpful, in getting us to this point, and I will certainly be speaking with you again, either via email or something else about, talking about the implementation strategy and other things that you might be able to help us with. So thank you.
Laura is next. Laura, I see you. Laura, you are.
Yep. Now you don't. Okay, now you can hear me. Okay. I'm over across the hall, not in attendance today, but I do have my full value tax rates. They should have been emailed to you, I'm hoping, but everybody should have a copy in their mailbox. These are the combined tax rates for town and county and school for all the towns in Washington County. We do this every year. If you have questions, you can contact me and I can go over them with you. Just a couple other quick things. We're currently getting ready to run final rolls for all the towns in Washington County. The final rolls are due and to be handed or filed with your town clerks on July 1st. So we're starting to print those out for all the assessors in all the towns. And the reval project is going along. We plan to have a meeting with the assessors, GAR, the state on after July 1st, after all the assessors are able to file their rolls. So. Other than that, I don't have anything else.
Okay.
Thanks for the report, Laura, because this is the best report ever.
I know you like it, Brian.
Dan Shaw has his hand up.
Yeah, Laura, I have a couple questions. On the full value tax rates, they're actually your first three columns aren't full value, are they?
Excuse me?
When you compare, in other words, if I was a supervisor in Greenwich or in Easton, and I wanted to compare my tax rates to other towns, those first three columns won't help me, will they?
Everything's been equalized using the equalization rate. So they should all be equal.
You've got my town tax rate and my county tax rate is not equalized.
No, it doesn't get equalized until it's all combined together.
Right, so they're not equalized, is what I'm saying. So, like, actually, when you look at, I'm in the town of Easton, but I'm in the Schuylerville School District.
Yep.
So it doesn't make any difference. But the town of Easton tax rate full value is only $3.51, and you have me at $161.78. Which is what my tax rate is with my 2.17. I understand that.
Correct.
But for this being, if you hand this out so that other towns can compare to other towns, if I want to compare to, let's say, Fort Edward, I have to calculate that all out to see where I stand with Fort Edward.
Nope, just go down. Fort Edward and Schuylerville School, you're at 28.95. If you go down to the Fort Edward and the Schuylerville School District, they're at 31.16.
Yeah, over there you have it, but on the county and town tax rate.
Right, those are not equalized. No, those are not equalized.
Could they be done that way though? I mean, because that's really what we want to compare to. I know I've talked to you about this before. I've always had this issue that I wish that they were town and county were equalized so that you knew what you were doing, comparing.
Dan, hopefully next year you'll be at 100% and you won't have a problem. You'll be 100% across the board and we won't have to worry about that.
Well, that's what but you could still equalize it there, is what I'm saying. So, because the purpose of handing this out, to show my equalization rate or my tax rate to every other town is only for comparison. I mean, otherwise I don't need to know Greenwich or Hartford or anybody else. But if I want to see that, to get comparisons, they have to be equalized.
They would have to be.
On this list, it's all equalized.
But that's on the top, but it's broke out different. You can't.
And they're also equal, and they're equalized in the full value tax rate. So if you go over to the far right, the two are equalized, but they're not equalized in the individual columns because those are the actual tax rates that are used to prepare the rolls for the town and county, for the school.
Right, that's what they are. They're not equalized.
Right, they're not equalized because that's how they're.
My next question, which I need help with, I know that the county tax rate is the town's total value as it's part of the pie. each town is a piece of the pie, and then
Out of the
once you
equalization
get-
table. Yep.
Yeah. Why aren't all town or county taxpayers being taxed the same amount per thousand? Because we're all getting the same services, right?
It all depends on how much of that pie that your town is based on your total assessed value.
Right.
So
So
you
it
pay
seems
a
like we'd
percentage
be
of the
all
pie.
relatively equal. And then I got thinking, is it something to do with exemption, our exempt status? In other words, you're valuing my town's full value, but then when you have ag exempt, you have veterans exemption. Is that really just shifting their taxes on other taxpayers within the town? That's what we're
When we calculate what part of the pie that you're paying, we use the total assessed value for roll section 1, which would be anybody with an ag, anybody with a veterans, anybody with that. So we use the total assessed value. The only difference would be your taxable or your wholly exempt roll section 8. That's not included when we calculate that chart. So if you have a lot of properties that are highly assessed and they are wholly exempt, churches, schools, hospitals, and they're exempt for some reason or another, then that portion of the value of your town is not included in your portion of the pie that you pay for county taxes.
So would you say that an agricultural town pays a higher tax rate to the county?
Nope, because we use the assessed value, not the taxable value.
For the county, because the exemption is not involved, right?
Well, I'm just trying to understand it. So there's no disadvantage to being an agricultural town, is what you're saying?
No.
Okay.
And we have a lot of agricultural towns in Washington County, not just yours. So we have some towns with high ag exemptions. So no, that's not taken into the calculation. Remember, we added that additional column for you on our spreadsheet that showed the taxable value that was equalized. We did that a few years ago when you were budget officer, so that you could see how much we took your taxable value and we equalized it. But that column has nothing to do with any of the splitting of the budget and tax rates.
Thank you.
Okay,
You're welcome.
thanks, Laura. Anything else? I'd like to, ask Stephanie to go next. She had a short request. We're getting into some longer conversations, so Stephanie, if you could make your request now and we'll go from there.
No.
No?
No, no,
Up here?
yes,
Okay.
Right, that's what I was pointing to.
Why can't we have it here?
right, but he wasn't.
Right.
That's your job.
All right, good morning. I've had a couple changes down at the county within the last week. Unfortunately, I have 3 people that have given me the resignation. So what I'm asking for today is to backfill what will end up being a total of 5 positions, 2 of which will be employees already getting a new position, a moved up position, and then 3 new employees altogether. Unfortunately, they have all gone elsewhere to look for employment. One is going all the way to Lewis County. So I am asking for the possible backfill.
Okay. Moved by Matt, second by?
You.
I'll second it. Melissa had a question?
Just gonna ask Stephanie for the title of the positions that you're backfilling. One is a senior motor vehicle license clerk, and then I will have to, with moving one of my employees up, I will need to backfill 2 motor vehicle license clerks. And then my index clerk, I will move my account clerk up to the index clerk, which for her, it would be a
normal transition that normally I would have asked for last year for her to get that position anyway. But being as though COVID, we didn't ask for any of that to help Brian out. So, and then I will have to backfill the, account clerk position.
So
Okay.
it's one senior motor vehicle license clerk, two motor vehicle license clerks, one account clerk, and one index clerk.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All in favor of moving this to personnel? Aye. Aye. Mr. Hanky?
Yeah, I was.
Okay. All right, carried. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on to buildings and grounds. Matt left. So, skipping over to county administrator. First on the agenda was ethics law. I think we've got an ethics law in the books. There was some, asked to review it.
Right, so we do have, ethics law that was adopted back in December of 1990. This law was in compliance with Article 18 of the New York State General Municipal Law. And it recognizes that varying degree of professional and government responsibility for an equitable requirement of disclosure and pursuant of official integrity, which must be balanced against individual constitutional rights. So I believe the part of this ethics law that we wanted to review, and possibly see if you wanted to make changes to, was the disclosure on interest portion, which is section 4 of that document.
Disclosure, okay. Well, I think there was a couple issues I had with it. Was that, number one, we asked, I think it's required to have financial disclosures, and we're not consistent in implementing those. They're supposed to be followed annually. And my comment was, if we have a law, local law that does that, we should do it. The second was in terms of the form itself. Some people have considered that form invasive. Do we want to consider, while this form, as Roger points out, is directly out of the law, do you want to consider adopting a less invasive form? I've seen some other copies, I've provided a couple other copies that I had from another organization about them. So I think those are the first points of discussion that we had. And I thought that it says on it before January 31st of each year, the CEO shall promulgate 2 lists. Well, should we just have 2 lists and have 2 lists instead of requiring the chairman to do it every year? Just have 2 lists, and then that list really shouldn't change. I mean, those are my comments.
So let me say, this is not our first go-around on the form, okay? And the lists didn't change every year that we did them for quite a few years. The minimum requirement on the disclosure, under general municipal law, the disclosure required by such law shall include information about any non-city, whatever, employment or interest that may give rise to a conflict of interest, including but not limited to interests of the filer, spouse, registered domestic partner, unemancipated children, and real property located, positions, and business dealings with, financial interest in, or gifts from any person or entities engaged in business dealings in the county, which is basically what your form does. When you get right down to it. The form itself is included in the general municipal law as well. It also it provides for broad categories so that it's not any more, I think that was the thinking, it wasn't any more intrusive than it had to be. And in section 812 of the general municipal law, it says the annual statement of financial disclosure shall contain the information and shall be in the form set here and below. So the out there, the general description is the one that is applying to it talks about what you can file in, larger cities and, the city of New York. But I think we're kind of stuck with that form. We can change the wording of it. I'd like to change the wording of it to be in plain English. A little bit more, because I was reading it again this morning, and it's very confusing. But, at the end of the day, it says shall be in the form as prescribed.
Okay. So change the wording, but, I think the other thing is we should have the lists. And I guess who is tasked with collecting the financial disclosure laws every single year?
Nobody under the law. What was happening prior to the last go around about the forms was the chairman would provide the list to me, and my staff would send out the blank forms. Or I imagine now what we'll do is send out some kind of connection where you can download the form and fill it out. And then we're retrieving them and filing them.
So could we have a simple form that says, there've been no changes to my last year's statement, instead of requiring them to fill out the whole thing? We used to have one like that.
Right, we did, and my humble opinion is yes, if there are no changes, however, the law doesn't provide for that.
Okay, so as soon as you fill it out, Xerox and change the date every year.
That would probably, and if it was an electronic.
There's no change, yeah.
If it was an electronic form, it would be much easier to do it as well.
Okay.
What'll happen is, so for example, my kids are both aged out, so I don't have any more unanticipated minors, so then there would be some changes that weren't in there before.
So you want to work on some of the wording for the form?
What I'd like to do is, in essence, keep the form, but then put an interpretation at, in parentheses, that what, after it tells you kind of what you're really looking for there. Because it can be kind of, in my opinion, it can be kind of confusing to what exactly you're looking for. And then there's a lot of negatives in there, so like there's a section dealing with credit card debt, but then it talks about, except if it's this. So I'd like to, instead of having all the wording with the exceptions, to say if it's this, put it in there. If it's not this, don't put it in there.
Okay,
So it would kind of be subtitling.
so if you can change that form for us and bring it back.
I'll work on it.
Number 9 says, any person recorded found in a statement. It continues on, that's, if you're required to, if there's any change, you need to report them again, but what caught my eye was, or becomes a candidate for county elected office after March 15th of the year for which employment is in effect, shall file the appropriate annual statement. Do we charge Board of Elections to take care of that? Because we wouldn't have the ability to do that.
You yourselves, if you were running for elective office, could rely on the form that you've already filled out, but a new candidate should be obtaining the form and filling it out. We can charge the Board of Elections with distributing the form.
Okay. That we should probably do. The other one that caught my eye was annual code of ethics review. Every employee official is required to attest on an annual basis that he or she has reviewed the code of ethics and file an attestation with the Washington County Ethics Board.
And I had thought we added that to the bottom of our form, and that way we got two things done with one form.
Right, but this difference is
So in other words,
it says every official employee,
yes,
doesn't limit it to those required to financial disclosure forms.
correct.
So how would that, if it was at the bottom of the form, how would that affect all the rest of the employees?
The rest of the employees would just have to file an attestation every year.
So for financial
And it's
statements,
supposed to be posted, so it's easily reviewable, which I believe we've done.
so financial statements are gonna be under the purview of the county attorney.
If you wish, I can continue to do that again.
Sure, why not?
Okay.
Dan?
Pages aren't numbered, so I think 3-4 pages, and you've got the ethics board. It says creation of the Board of Ethics is optional under chapter 813 of the laws of 1987. And implementing discretion, these requirements may also be fulfilled by filing with the temporary state commission on local government ethics, pursuant to chapter or article 18. We don't have an ethics board, correct?
No, you do.
We do. Well,
And they're expired
right, we established an ethics board. We've had problems maintaining the membership because in the history of the ethics board, I don't think they've gotten a complaint.
Well, if you do have an ethics board, when you go to the next page, establishment, and then also say serve at the pleasure of the board of supervisors, and they're appointed, they can serve up to 4 years consecutively, but it almost seems like every year, one's gotta come off and the board has to appoint a new one, and I haven't ever served here and appointed a member to the ethics board. Is it done at committee level and not?
No.
It's at board of supervisors?
We haven't done it lately, but you've done it. I would almost guarantee.
We did it
Yeah.
my first year as chairman, when we didn't have we
Okay,
didn't have an ethics board, we appointed an ethics board.
Right.
And
so, but we aren't doing it
and
in,
we staggered them, so there should be guys coming off and on, I
think Dan's volunteering right now.
I lost track.
no.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
not
there's-
chairman anymore.
One,
I'm not saying I'm volunteering.
One at a time, please. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, my point is where I was leading up is, I think that part of it is important. If you're going to have 4 members, 3 are non-employees, right? Because I think it's the way I read it. It ought to be posted somewhere. Let's say that I'm an employee, and how do I know who to find if I want to report an ethics violation? It ought to be made public, and, I don't care, in the break rooms, everywhere. Otherwise, the minute you go ask somebody, where do I file a complaint, the minute a complaint pops up, they know who did it.
Well, if you're certifying that you've read the code of ethics every year, you know exactly where to go file a complaint.
So Debbie is looking at the list, I think.
correct, yes. The last resolution looks like it was done in 2017. There's two members' terms have expired. One is vacant, and there are 2 members that their terms will expire July 20th of 21. Matt Jones was on it, his term expired in 19. John Huntington from Jackson, his term expired in July of 20. There must have been a vacant slot, and there's 2 gentlemen on that their term expires July of 2021.
So we should go through and make sure we appoint people to the ethics board.
There's another layer here, is it this ethics board also, whereas the town doesn't have an ethics board, it comes before this board?
You can't.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's a little more important because if we have a problem in our town, it comes here if we don't have our own ethics board.
Remembering that ethics in this situation means conflict of interest,
Yeah,
and that's all it means.
but sometimes there's conflicts with you taking care of it at the town, so it has to go somewhere else.
Yes, but it's improperly exercised. So if you disclose your conflict and treat it accordingly, there is not an ethics problem.
Right.
Or a conflict of, I prefer to use conflict of interest so that everybody understands. Ethics has many meanings to many different people. Conflict of interest has a statutory meaning.
Mr. Hankey?
A lot of the things for the ethics board, we do have one in Argyle, things that have come up have been before the fact. Somebody's saying, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Does the ethics board want to rule on it, tell me whether they think it's a violation or not? So a lot of it's not, complaint, hey, Dan Shaw went and did this, I'm going to complain to the ethics board. A lot of it is prophylactic. They had it keep it from happening. That's my comment on the ethics board. On farther down in here, it also talks about appointing a council. And it can be the county attorney, which I'm not sure what it is or not right now, but it would almost seem to me like it shouldn't be. I mean, Roger might well have a conflict he wants to report or talk about. He shouldn't be the one advising the board. I think we ought to have an outside counsel also.
You've never been willing to pay that bill.
Yeah.
Somebody never had a bill.
No, because I've been doing it.
Right. No, I understand the reason that I'm, you know, and with Roger, I presume there's not gonna be an issue, but, you know, this is.
Roger would accuse
Look
himself
out.
if that was.
Right, and then you would have to pay.
Then you would have to pay.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so, we're gonna update that, any other comments? So we're gonna update the financial form with the language. We're gonna appoint new members to the ethics board.
And that's always been the challenge, so if you have recommendations, you should bring them forward.
I think one's supposed to be employee, is one supposed to be a board member too?
No,
It's not?
That's
Okay,
here to
no.
okay.
It's 3 at-larges and 1 employee. The idea being that the employee at least would have an idea of how the county works and operates.
Dave, I wasn't quite clear what you said. Did you say that the financial form was intrusive or not inclusive?
There are some people who feel asking those questions are invasive because they have to answer them. They don't want people to know anything about their financial. Intrusive too, yes. Intrusive.
Intrusive, okay. And is the majority of the committee that feel this way, or just you?
I'm just bringing.
I haven't heard anything from the committee other than you made that comment to have that changed.
I have heard, it has been recently, I've heard some members of the board say that it was intrusive. I've heard more from other places. It's come up at other places. Committee's no action. Roger's going to, because what he says is the questions have to, are in the general municipal law, the categories. We can't change those. He is gonna change some of the language so it's more understandable.
We'll provide additional language that
Make it fair.
Right, right.
And if we're gonna be invasive, we should be on the environmental, invasive species, or provide.
The questions are, you've had people refuse to serve on various boards that you appoint because of that form. In at least one case I can think of. Somebody refused to serve on the college board because they did not want, they owned a closely held business and did not want that information. Even in the broad reporting categories, did not want to disclose that information and refused to serve.
Day and a half?
If I remember a few years ago, I thought it was very intrusive, and my one complaint was there's a section there about gifts received, and I said, what about the scenario if somebody has a daughter who just got an engagement ring or something like that? I said all those things would have to be included, which I thought had nothing to do with what they're really trying to ask.
Okay, but that's also for, you only have to report those living with you, right, Roger?
Unemancipated.
Okay, unemancipated children.
Claim them on your tax return?
Okay. Okay,
That's what I would, and that's an example, I think, of the commentary.
It's not the health insurance, it's not the 26.
No.
So you can tell your child don't get married until you're 19 years old?
or leave the house before you get engaged.
Why not work in Argyle?
Right.
All right,
We could go all day about this.
let's go with the,
I
next.
litigate emancipation on a regular basis in a different court, so.
All right, Melissa, policy review, purchasing policy?
Can I ask one question about, are we actually changing the Washington County ethics law that was adopted, or are we just changing the form?
Just changing the
And
form.
we're not changing the form so much as adding to it.
Editing it.
Clarifying.
Just editing.
Thank you.
Okay, purchasing policy.
Okay, in reviewing the purchasing policy, that was last revised in January of 2020, which really wasn't that long ago, I guess. We just found one, paragraph that probably could use a little clarity, which is page 5. It's on bidding, item 8. Basically, it's just, right now we have some confusion as to how the awarding of the bids, how that actually takes place. So we thought that if we just change the language, so that bids for commodities and or services costing $50,001 or more for general purchases and $75,001 or more for public works purchases shall be approved by the Department's Oversight Committee or Finance Committee and awarded by the full Board of Supervisors. It's what's been happening right now, but it always causes a lot of questions.
And just straighten out those words will make it that much better.
Yeah, it's pretty vague right now, I think. I think it says right now we just, have to let the supervisors know or something. I think there's some wording about that. Yeah, because they were just providing notice when actually we would like the Board of Supervisors to award it. Thank you.
There's a meeting, they'll be aware.
Okay. So I need a motion to adopt that change. Motion by Matt, or by Bob, second by Matt. Any further questions, comments? All in favor?
I have
Gary?
I have a comment.
Okay. Yes, Dana?
Melissa, I think it's also a little confusing because the dollar amounts that you talk about are not the same dollar amounts as what is required for bidding. For example, I think municipal works is it $35,000? You have to have certain things for bidding, but in order for the board to approve it, it's now $75,000. Are there different numbers for different things?
Yes, there are.
Can we keep it simple and say there is a Board of Supervisors approval for the things that require bidding at 35,000, not 75,000? Because I think we're going to get confused about different numbers.
I agree with you. The purchasing policy to me is quite confusing anyway. I think that's why there's always so many questions at all the committee meetings. I don't know, I guess, how those amounts came up. I believe that they were, provided, I believe, by the state. I don't think they're numbers that we can change. But I should look into it a little bit further if you like.
Well, if I remember right, and I might be wrong in the numbers, I thought it was if you're going to buy equipment and machinery, something contractual, I think it's $20,000, but a public works like a building is 35,000. Are those the right numbers?
Yeah, that sounds correct.
So I think in order, like I said, to keep it simple, we should go with those numbers because people are going to ask, you know, why didn't we put input on it if it's something that was a bid? Because I think for the public works, your number's more than double the requirement for the bid. 75,000 is more than double 35,000. I just find it odd how we have different numbers.
So do you think it'd be helpful right now if you change that to just any award or any bid that is actually awarded, it goes before the board? Is that what you're looking for?
Well, I think it should be reflective upon what the state requires for bidding. I think if it's something that is awarded for bidding, then the Board of Supervisors should also be the one that says yes on the bidding. Right now, you can have bidding, and then the Board of Supervisors are only notified after the fact. Unless it gets to a certain threshold, which is arbitrary, I think to me, you just set the number.
Well, don't the oversight committees have to approve going out for RFP or bid?
But we don't approve the bid.
No, but it comes back and it goes back to the full board for
It goes
approval.
to the committee to accept the bid or reject the bid, and then it's going to the full board to award it.
But the wording that's there was if there were time constraints, you let the oversight committee do it and just notify the board. And sometimes that is important. Other words, we'll be calling special board meetings. Not that I'm opposed to that, but I mean, you just would have to, but then you have to have a quorum to get something done. So after you hear the whole thing go full circle, it makes you wonder if you should change the language at all.
You're saying award the bid, have the committee award the bid?
Well, that's the way it's written here. When you see what's struck out. It says, in such cases where the Department Oversight Committee awards such bids, notice should be provided to all supervisors of the results award following action by the Oversight Committee. And so I'm thinking that the reason that was done was because of a timing issue, that the full board has to come back. If it always has to go to the full board, it takes more weeks. So you'd have to have a special meeting in those instances if the timing was the reason.
So in other words, it's probably easier to call a committee meeting than a full board meeting.
Well, it's easier to get a quorum. That's what, you know, compared to a special meeting. So that's why I'm just asking. After reading it through a couple times, and seeing what's added, what's deleted, I'm thinking that's probably why it was done. It was, if it went through committee, you could award it and move on rather than wait another 2 weeks to award it.
Matt?
Maybe that's
So
why
you do it in committee to award the lower numbers. On the higher numbers, you want it to go up for approval and then award, and that was presumed. Now, if we have to have a special board meeting, have a Zoom meeting, bing, bang, boom, it's over, as opposed to dragging us all in here.
Well, that's
Because we need to have a Zoom meeting now,
Yeah.
or a bit if we had to.
Yeah.
There aren't that many $50,000 and $75,000 awards we really have to deal with, and they're usually playing far enough ahead, so it's not an issue to do it at a board meeting.
And you can always bid on your phone if you're, you know, if you're out somewhere, you can just get on the Zoom meeting and go. So.
Day and a half?
Why can't you say that the bid will be awarded at the monthly Board of Supervisors meeting? Then they all know what the deadline is. Why, you shouldn't have a special meeting unless it's a one-off unusual circumstance.
Right.
And that's what they're talking about, it's a one-off on a special circumstance.
Yeah.
Where there's time that needs to be awarded for emergency repairs or something.
And I don't
Replacement.
recall seeing any of those in the last,
No,
we've awarded
No,
any bids in the
doesn't
last
happen
few months.
because the department has the administrator got their act together, and it's all comes in sequence.
Yeah.
Dave?
Dana?
I think it would be very unusual for you to have an emergency award of something that has to be done, but you put it out to bid beforehand. You know, I don't think you have time to put it, you don't have time to put it out to bid beforehand if it's an emergency.
Right.
So
There's
that
a whole
won't happen.
separate section of the policy that actually applies to emergency purchases, and that procedure is different.
Okay. So we do make the provisions. Okay. So do you want to adopt this as the way it is or not? Or do you want to change the terminology on the dollar amount?
I'd like to adopt it the way it is, I'll make that motion.
We already had a motion and a second, we had discussion, so I need to call a vote.
Okay.
All in favor of adopting as is?
Why not? We'll still have confusion years from now.
Okay. Next, we have, anything else that,
That's all I have.
Matt,
Walk up here.
walk up here.
Yeah, usually we gotta have the computer going down the hallway, right, over the ops report.
We'll see.
Yeah. Hope you're not doing a lot of court. At least you got your lawyer with you.
He's right next to me.
You guys recommend that?
All right, so I'm gonna start off with a couple of, updates. One, parks are open, everything seems to be smoothed out with them. Mother Nature kind of just, gave us a 49 degrees and raining the first weekend, and then the second weekend was 90, so we had a little bit of problem getting our beaches ready for the 90-degree weather, but it all came together. The other is the roof project over at Burgoyne is done, and it came in right on target. There was not $1 more than what we had budgeted for. That all went good. The next thing is the RTUs down at the Law Center, the two that we put out the bid. Those bids came in, and Danforth is the low bidder at $378,000, and we had budgeted $500 for it, so that's good. And I'd like to start the process of awarding that bid, which would be approving it here and awarding it at full board. Motion to approve, Matt. Second by Mr. Henke. You have a question?
think it has to be discussed in finance, because we talked about the stimulus program, and I think that all comes, I just want to make sure it gets discussed and not left off.
My motion was moved to finance.
That's what I heard. All in favor? Carried. Any opposed? Sorry. Carried. Thank you.
And the last thing is the charging station. Stuff down there. So, I think I'm gonna start out with a recommendation and then let you guys go from there. You know, everybody's been involved in this in the last couple of months. We'll discuss it, you know, things have settled and dust is kind of cleared. I've been able to look into the project more. We had originally two, prospective scopes of work. One was 4 stations out in front of DPW barn and 8 in the back parking lot. Through grants and everything, most of it was gonna be covered. The lift for the 4 out front was very little. It didn't, you know, create much work for the county employees. It was covered mostly by the grant. The work out back to put them in the back parking lot was a heavy lift. We would have had to incorporate DPW, machinery, hours, parking lot problems, you know, digging a trench out there. Plus the cost to us would be more, obviously, in a percentage, you know, because of the cost. I'd like to see, and this is my recommendation, is to do all of them out in front of DPW for the employees. If you're gonna do 12 of them, that number could be up to you, 8 of them, 4 of them, however many you wanna do. I would say, let's try to do them out by the road. That helps the, you know, applying for the grant. For one, it's a very public place. It's not, you know, out behind the building, so it makes it easier on, you know, me and the county as we're applying for the grant. 2, the out-of-pocket expense would be a lot less. Some of the concerns were employees walking over there. Currently, we have cars farther away in the carpool, and for the people that are using them, lots of times they drive their own vehicle out, park next to it. There's plenty of parking out there for that. What I'd like to get out of this is quite possibly a budget number. Working with contractors and everything, if this is a project you wanna do, let's just say, I'm gonna throw a number out there, it's up, you know, for debate, but 30,000. We're willing to invest 30,000 as a county. Up to 30,000. I can start working with the contractors, get hard numbers, and start the application process, if we have that number, and that commitment. We're running out of, you know, just using people's time. You know, they get sick of us. That's right, the contractor. So, clarification, so 12 were out by the road, even though they're out by the road, it'll be the ones facing the building, because that's where the line would run the easiest.
Correct, it'd be where the old fence was between the
Right.
DPW and the parking. They would be there, bollards, you know, pull-in spaces. I think that's the best location, and it's the easiest lift on the county.
And it's up to $30,000.
Up to 30,000. I can work with the plug-in stations or whoever the state contract award, you know, contractor is, and say, you know, it gives me a chance to really work with them and say, if you want 12, like, I can get the most out of the 30, you know, or a number, but leaving it open for them, what it causes is another, if I say, we want 8, and they come in, and they say, well, it's 32. Well, I don't know, less than, you know, well, that's where I say, no, we only have 30, you either do it for it, you know, gives me the chance to really work with them. So, both counties, as I remember from our discussion the other day, is that we can get this grant for public as long as we don't have a fleet of electric cars. Is that correct? In each grant, there's specifics. You have to have it available to the public for a certain amount of time. So we'd have to have signage that says available, you know, to public these hours, and we would have to go by them in the county. We don't have a fleet right now, so it'd be very easy, you know, to do the project. But if we did have a fleet, we just wouldn't be able, we'd have to have it open for these certain hours, and we would set those hours. Okay. And the units themselves would track that. They would track who's charging when. There's a reporting as part of the application, but that's part of the software that comes with it, so that would be easy enough. Melissa?
At the May Finance Committee meeting, it was, I guess we were tasked with authorizing ChargePoint to go ahead and submit the application for the grant. Matt and I spoke to that rep, and it turned out that it wasn't just signing a piece of paper for an authorization. They basically, to get the grants, there's a large application that needs to be filled out, and they actually really want commitment, that we're going to purchase these. You know, I think that that's where we are right now. We're just looking for the commitment and the approval, that the county wants to go in that direction, the board wants to go in that direction for these charge stations. We really just need that to go forward at this point.
And to add to that, the NYSERDA grant, they are not allowed to. It's against the law for them to fill it out for us. So we actually have to apply. We use their information, their quotes and everything, but they're not allowed to fill it out for us. Bob?
I have trouble being in favor of building a whole bunch of charging stations if we don't have anything to do with them ourselves. However, what I would like to do is take a step further here, maybe in discussing this, but I think I could certainly support putting them in. We've had all kinds of heat and light and fuel spot and things over our vehicles and stuff out here. I understand from Carpool that DSS really is in need of about 3 vehicles this year. I think number one, we ought to put charging stations in. I think number 2, we ought to go out for bid to get 3 identical vehicles, 3 identical models, 1 gas, 1 hybrid, 1 electric. Run them for a year and have some data-driven stuff as to what choices we ought to make. So we're actually talking about how much it actually did cost us for each individual sort of thing without, rattling our sabers over speculation as to what it's going to cost and this sort of thing. That's not an entirely original idea. I believe that the first one that mentioned it was Roger, actually, but it seemed like he doesn't want to take credit for it. I come up with it all entirely on my own.
I'm edging away from that as fast as I can.
Yeah. Okay. I just thought it'd be nice to have our discussion be data-driven. That seemed like an easy way of doing it. For what it's worth, I could support the charging stations if we were going to actually do something like that.
Matt?
I think you're on step 6, I'm still on step 1. You're looking for permission today to make an application
I am looking
for the grant
knowing that
with a commitment from the committee that we would be willing to invest up to $30,000 of county money toward that process.
Correct.
Setting a
budget number.
Now, the question I have is, the application goes in, the grant comes back, and they say, yep, you're approved. Are the 4 of us here right now making that commitment to the $30,000 that it can't be changed by government ops finance or the full board later on? Is that a done deal?
I think.
Because I don't think we can do that.
As far as change, I'd be looking for a budget number to work with, because you'd still be having to do a full board. You still have to have approval, not.
We don't have to accept the grant. We never have to accept the grant.
Sure, 100%. You wouldn't have to.
So the finance could eventually, or full board later on, say, no, we don't want that grant.
Yeah, and you might not say you want to spend 20,000, whatever your budget number, it gives me the number to work with the contractors to be able to fill out.
Because you can't fill out the grant application unless you have a budget number to work with.
Yeah.
Okay, so all we're doing today is approving the application for a grant.
Correct.
No further.
Did you make a motion?
If that's the line in the sand, I will do that, but no further. That I'm okay with that, but if it's further, I can tell me ahead of time.
This committee can't do anything about cars that belongs either in HHS or DSS or,
I absolutely understand that, but I wanted the philosophy to come out, and I'm not crazy about putting a bunch of charging stations just for the hell of it. We got nothing to do with it.
Before we get discussion.
I just want to clarify, if this ever went ahead,
It would have, I don't know how you could do it without coming back to this committee, finance, you open the door, whatever.
open the door. I wish you didn't. Okay. This door has to be opened or closed. Otherwise, it's just.
Do I have a second on that? Ultimately, that's the deal.
Can we use county vehicles and plug them in there a year from now this whole thing falls in place.
100%, yes. Not 100% of the time, but you can.
If they're available, okay.
That's
So I'm making a motion, we allow them to apply for the grant. It's either gonna go up or down, let's just move on one way or the other.
And can I have a second on that, please? Mr. Hankey made a second. Discussion. Dan?
I feel like I'm trying to take a lead cord, a 100-foot lead cord that's knotted up on my lawn and sort out how to get it all apart and understand where we're going with this. Originally, this was, and I commend Brian for it, he suggested we try electric cars. And then it segued into a charging station, which $30,000 now is going to be, or up to $30,000. We might buy one electric car. We might buy that a hybrid. We don't even know if we're doing that. That's just a start. And so now we're spending $30,000, and at the last meeting, when was it the last meeting? Gave a presentation, it was unanimous by the committee that we get the data from them on what the usage of electric cars would be in Washington County by comparing it to other counties like ours. We haven't got that. They didn't produce that. If nobody uses that, no local community member uses that, we're all happy. We spent $30,000 so that it sits out there, nobody uses it. We don't have anything to use it with.
We will.
We might have one, but for what, $800? You can get the lead for that one.
But it's $30,000, when there's 4 stations out there or 12 stations out there.
And it's $30,000 less if there's no stations out there.
We're not spending 30, I made that very clear in my point.
No,
This is later on, we're applying
This is just more data
When
gathering.
the grant comes back,
this is the same as that parking lot when we paid $80,000 for a study and didn't do nothing.
I think
Melissa has the floor.
We'll see. You've gone. And can we get that data that was requested and I said they provide?
Matt, tell me if I'm wrong here, but I think it's more, we're looking for more than just a number to apply, right? Because we already had permission to apply for the grant. We were supposed to apply before.
We have permission,
To
the
apply for the
scope
grant.
of work that was before. What we need is a scope of work of what we're going to get.
Right, if we are going to, so if we do this,
Go forward. We need to have the correct scope of work, which I suggested would be out in front of there. We can apply with that and up to a $30,000 budget, but to their point, like, we still have to get it approved. They still could say no and don't do the project. The grant doesn't commit us to doing it. We can still turn down the grant. They save the grant money for a certain amount of time. You are, bound to use it within 2 years or something to that effect. There is dates, but.
So, to be clear, we're not authorizing spending the money, we're just saying we're establishing a budget up to $30,000, so when it comes, so they can use it to talk to the contractors, and when it comes back to the full board will be responsible for spending it.
A lot of this is narrowing the scope of work for me and Melissa, because I'm going from here to here to here.
contractors can't be just.
And it's the same thing with our contract, we have to have a scope of work. At some point, a commitment to this project would be good one way or another. Like, if you're gonna shut the door, at some point, we have to know that.
And that's what I thought NYSERDA was looking for,
Correct.
was that commitment.
Well, they're looking for a budget number. We can't apply for the grant, Melissa, and
No,
then change our scope of work, because we would have to reapply again. So this, I guess, is maybe closing the door on the scope of work of what we would be doing, but not necessarily whether we are doing it or not doing it.
So we can still decide we're not gonna go forward with that.
Right, it would
That's right.
still go to finance to move money to make it happen.
Although it would save us from applying again. If we decided that, the budget number gives me, I can figure out how many we can put out there.
So,
If it's 12, 10, 8.
So,
I can make one application, I can't make that application again for 4 more. Once we use the grant once, we wouldn't be eligible to use it again.
so even if we didn't execute now, we have the quotes, and then at budget time, we decide by electric vehicles, then we have the quote to put the charging stations
The
in.
new scope yet, that's, it's only.
I don't have the scope, right, the quote for a new scope. This kind of just come about, like last week, as we're working with them and everything, and as I'm reading through the, 50 pages of the grant application, and then really realizing what we have to have in place
It
to
just
apply.
makes the most sense
Yeah.
to put them all together and
Okay,
think of those.
so Dan,
Yeah, I mean, at our last meeting, and I don't know if it was at the board meeting, but my feeling was there wasn't a majority of supervisors that was supporting this. And I know that you're trying just to move it to get it resolved, to come to the conclusion of where we stand. I understand that. But you're down to 3 members of a committee and a fill-in, no offense. And to a most likely possibility that it's never gonna happen. So this has to be unanimous vote, is that correct?
Yes.
I
think
have people,
David
right?
needs to know that, this needs to be a
Well, he knows
unanimous
it,
vote.
trust me, he knows it.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to say one word, or a couple.
I can't say just 2.
I don't know what everyone thinks how we got here or why we got here. Our sales tax is the one revenue that covers every department here. Usually our expenses here can't be reduced across all departments. And only this would only be the first step, I get it. But this is an opportunity to really change our costs of all our fleet cars and carpool eventually. It won't happen overnight. Right now, the price of gas from our last real numbers for carpool are 2019, because last year and this year are pretty well skewed for what it was. But our average price per gallon was $2. Right now, we are at $2.40. Right now, I have to raise the budget number for fuel because our actual was pretty close to budgeted in 19. We were very close, off by $1,000, I don't remember which way. So that number has to be raised in the 22 budget. It has to be increased by 20%, just the fuel line. Forget the maintenance line with all the vehicles getting older and all that. Just the fuel line, today, you'd have to increase this 20%. By the time we're ready to pass the budget, I've probably got to increase that by 30% if fuel keeps going the way it's going. And it still may be short of where they're projecting it to be next year. So I'm trying to get started down a road to where we can avoid those costs. And the thing of it is, it's avoided costs. They're not going to break even right away, but eventually, and Dana Hassel brought up a good point when I talked to him about this. He said, well, as soon as they get us all switched over to electric will be more expensive than gas. Dana could be exactly right. That's a possibility. But right now, since it's a 5-year program, if they're trying to switch everybody over, price for 5 years, that's not going to be the case. Gasoline is going to pay the price because they're going to manipulate it to drive everybody this direction. And I think the county can save a lot of money here going this route. But we have to get started at some point.
So-
It makes the normal sense. I had the least at risk the way I wrote it to begin with. Where we're at now is the next best scenario. And so I think being all up front together, and if we can get away with $30,000, that's pretty cheap, and I'd be happy with that.
So what we're voting on is defining the tasks that Melissa and Matt have already been charged with and putting a scope on the dollar amount we're willing to budget. So that's all we're doing. And it'll still come back to the board. So I'll call a vote on this at this point. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motion's defeated.
So I'll bring it directly to finance. Because this is our taxpayers' dollars that we're throwing away. And I'm very concerned about that. You're talking over 5 years.
You bring in finance.
You bring in finance. Dana Hogan?
Yes.
Dana Hogan?
Yeah, I don't have to wait.
$30,000 is the same amount of money that the supervisors, except me, approved in giving bonuses in this budget year. Just want to remind people that. So when you say saving money, that's not always the case.
Anything else come before the board?
We're getting that money back.
We're getting that money back.
One, we had to mail it to the guy because he left our employment.
Motion, meeting adjourned.
No, you've got other on here, don't you?
I just asked, no one said anything.
My arm was getting tired, I had to have a rest. I want to know where we stand from last meeting to this meeting on Summit Lake. The letter that was supposed to be sent to Argyle, and the water line is going down to Pleasant Valley.
Don't worry about it, Argyle's gonna send you a letter here in about 2 days.
It rained last night, so
Is it gonna be addressed to everybody so we all can see
It's
it?
gonna be emblazoned and sky rating, I think.
You're gonna start with an S.
Okay, how about the water line going to Pleasant Valley?
It's with our attorney right now.
With our attorney.
With our attorney's reviewing it, when he gets done, I'll send it to you.
Wait, your attorney?
Argyle was sending you guys a letter, so.
And the water line's still in process with our
The
attorney.
water line isn't on that property.
Still talking with our attorneys.
Yeah.
What's the problem, what's taking that so long that they can't?
Because we can't dictate to somebody who's gonna take over our water line.
I thought that, Roger, you said that we don't have to reply that or fight that.
If you want to turn it off, we'll turn it off. Maybe that'll get their attention. I would recommend it, but.
Well, what's gonna happen when Public Works, or?
What is the water line, what is the water line costing us right now?
Nothing, as far as I know.
So, the water line's costing us nothing.
Matt would be better.
The water line's costing us nothing, right?
Right now, the water line costs us nothing.
That leaky roof didn't cost us anything either. While it was leaking, it was only the problem after, is to stop the leak, so it didn't cost. Same thing I'm trying to do here.
Right now, we are playing, it doesn't cost us anything. If there was a maintenance issue with it right now, though, it could cost us something, but we have the option at the county, like Roger just said, to shut the water off to them.
No, you just recommended that you didn't.
He recommended that we do.
Okay, so
And
here's
that's my
the,
recommendation too, but it doesn't mean that you can't.
Matt,
I'm not gonna make it.
here's the question. Tomorrow, if that water line blows out in the middle of that field, what are you gonna do?
Shut off the water.
You're gonna do nothing.
Because then you force my hand to shut the water off. Right.
And then what are you gonna do once you turn the valve? You're gonna say, okay, my job is done.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say Pleasant Valley, if you want water again, you better come up here and take it over and fix it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm hoping I get this
Yeah, Dana.
letter from the town of Argyle.
Dana?
Because it sounds like that's gonna solve all our problems.
I'll wait till Dan stops speaking.
I'm done.
I make a motion that we inform all parties involved that the county is turning the water off December 31st, 2021.
We don't have a quorum. We don't have a quorum. Make all the motions you want.
Okay, I make a motion that we depose the chairman of this committee.
All right, anything else? Adjourned.